Welcome back, everyone. I'm Tommy Canale, and this is Before the Lights podcast, the show to find out how those in sports, music, and entertainment made their mark. Please go to the website, beforethelightspod.com, and follow us on Instagram at beforethelightspod. Make sure you subscribe and share the show. All right, everyone, get a coffee, get a drink, tell everyone you know, family, friends, neighbors, and yes, that includes strangers. You can tell them, you don't have to get close to them. We're in an in-depth conversation today with our guest, and my guest today is a PGA Tour veteran. He has made over 170 cuts on the tour, holds multiple course records, including a 63 at Cypress Point that ties the course record with Ben Hogan. He has played in 8 major tournaments. He is currently the director of instruction at High Performance Golf Institute at Lake Las Vegas, located at highperformancegolf.com. We welcome Craig Barlow to the show. Craig, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tommy. Yeah, thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for being on. I want to go back with you now and pick your brain a little bit and tell me, what's your first memory of the game of golf?
So my dad played golf, very avid recreational golfer. And like every 9 or 10-year-old boy, I just wanted to be with my dad. And I don't really remember my very first round, but I just always knew that my dad was always going to the golf course and I wanted to be with him. I know my first round of golf was when I was 10 years old. I lived next to a park, though, and I think I was tinkering a little bit with golf before I actually went out on the golf course. So he had a 9-iron for me and some wiffle balls, and I'd always go over to the park and whack away. And so I would definitely have to say that my dad was my reasoning for starting up golf.
And is it true, were you at one time a standard bearer at the Las Vegas Invitational Golf Tournament?
I was. Yeah, I did it probably 6-7 years.
And what do you recall about doing that? What did you take from that? Did you take anything from that, or are you just a kid having fun out there?
Oh, no, I remember, I thought it was obviously cool, and most of them were really nice. I remember I signed bear for Greg Norman when he was #1 in the world, and he was not nice. And I hope he's not listening to this. And that's okay. It wasn't like he wasn't mean. It's just, when you're #1 in the world, it's all business. So
sure.
As I grew up and matured, I kind of understood that. But as a 12-year-old kid, you didn't understand why he wasn't talking to you. But no, I remember, for the most part, I was always tickled to death when they'd give you a golf ball or a glove, or they'd even just ask you what your name was. And when I played on tour, I tried to remember those moments, and I always introduced myself. And, I definitely didn't spend too much time talking to them because it was a business, but I tried to at least spend a couple minutes, asking them if they play, what's their name, how old are they, just questions that I remember I wish that they were asking me. So.
I'm sure that's gone a long way with the people you have touched in your career. You're a state champion in high school. You were also 5th in tennis as well. So you were a tennis player as well.
I was first team. Yeah. As a senior in high school, I was first team all state in golf and tennis. Difference was 4 guys that were ahead of me in tennis, I could never beat in a million years. So I happened to be clearly better than everybody else, but the 4 guys that were better than me were head and shoulders better than me. So it was never a tough decision which sport I was going to play. I loved tennis. Like I said, I grew up next to a park, and the park had tennis courts, so I played a lot of tennis as a kid as well. And I am a big tennis fan for sure.
What type of work did you put into your game then in high school, before we get into where you are now? But just in high school, what kind of work did you put in?
Okay. I wouldn't call it work. I would call it the love of the game. So I spent lots of hours at the golf course having fun. I had a handful of buddies that were in the same shoes that I was in that just loved playing golf, and we couldn't get enough of it. Looking back at it, it was never productive. I mean, I can't say it wasn't productive, but it was never structured. It was never structured work. It was just me having a passion for the game, always wanting my hands on the clubs, always wanting to be at the golf course, wanting to play, wanting to have putting games, chipping games, trying to hit the range part, just all the stuff the kids do. And I don't know that I would do it much different, actually, because I really had a passion and love for the game, and I think as the game has improved and the kids have gotten better and younger, they're pushed maybe a little harder too. So I think they lose a little bit of that game that I'm fortunate enough that I still got to treat it as a game when I was a kid.
I would agree with you. Kids these days are pushed a lot different than when I grew up, for sure. When you grew up.
They are.
You ended up at Taft Junior College in California. How did that path develop that you ended up at Taft?
Robert Gomez's dad, Tony Gomez, knew the golf coach, and Tony was a member at Black Mountain, which is where I played. And, he followed my junior career and knew that I was up and coming. I didn't get a lot of Division I offers, and he knew the coach at Taft Junior College, and it was actually a very good athletic school. And he just said, "Hey, I want you to talk to this coach." The coach called me. They had a full ride for me, and coming from Henderson, where my dad made a good living, but we weren't really rich, so I couldn't. Money did matter. And when they offered me a full ride, I was just like, okay, this is a good opportunity for me to go, and off I went.
Speaking of full rides, and put that comparison where we're at today, in all sports, less than 4% of the people get full rides. And when you go to golf, it's less than 2%. So,
wow,
that's
wow,
pretty big to get a full ride no matter where it's at.
No, you're right. And there was, when I got to Taft, I wasn't the best player on the team, and it kind of upset me. And I left the best player on the team. So, it was, everything happens for a reason. I'm a competitive person. The few guys that were there, I could tell that I needed to get better if I wanted to play with them. And by the end of the year, I had passed them.
So you changed your work ethic quite a bit when you were at Taft, going to just playing for the love of the game to learning how to get better.
Yeah, for sure. And Taft was a great experience for me. It was a little small town. It's an oil town. There was nothing to do except golf and go to school. You were pretty much forced to do your schoolwork. And if I wasn't doing my schoolwork, I was at the golf course. It was a great experience. I have great memories from when I was there.
Moving up into 1994, you're the Nevada State Am winner and the Southern Nevada Association Player of the Year. In the same year, you played in the U.S. Open at Oakmont. What was that like for you, Craig, going from playing here in Nevada, being a State Am winner, Player of the Year, to playing in the U.S. Open?
It was the defining moment in my golf career. I had no idea what golf was going to be in my life until I played in that U.S. Open. I knew I was good. I knew I loved playing. I knew I wanted to play. But as far as direction, I didn't have a lot of direction. I was 21 years old. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't think I was good enough to play golf, even though I was good. I just, I kind of treated that as a new or a high plateau, and it should be. There are very few people make it out there. Once I qualified for the U.S. Open and I went back there and I was playing against Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer and Greg Norman and the best, I was like, oh my gosh, it was such an adrenaline high. I shot 80-80. I didn't even sniff making the cut. I do remember I didn't play that bad. I had no course management skills. I'd never played in rough before. I'd never played with green speeds like that, and I got exposed. With that being said, it also made me realize, man, you know what? Maybe I can do this. When I came back from there, I just remember I looked at all the tournaments that I was playing in so differently. Like, here I am last week playing in the United States Open, and the next week I was playing in the Clark County Amateur, so it was definitely I don't know if the word cocky, but confident. Like, hey, I just played against Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer. I think I can play against the amateurs here in Las Vegas.
Yeah. And you won every amateur title from that point before turning pro, including the 95 Nevada State Match Play Championship. And you touched on it, but if you would expand a little bit more, what was your confidence level like soaring? Because you just weren't losing anything that you put your name into locally.
Yeah, it was just it was the needle that pushed me over the edge. So, I'd be lying if I said that the game of golf doesn't have a lot of confidence in it, and it gave me the confidence needed to propel me forward. I had done it locally, but I wanted to make sure that I could do it nationally. So in '95, I actually traveled back east, and I played in the Northeast Amateur, the Susquehanna, the Western Amateur, the Dogwood Invitational, the Monroe. I played in all the big amateur tournaments, and they're all on pretty much the East Coast. And that was going to be my barometer on whether I was good enough to turn pro or not. And I had a very good summer. I didn't win anything that summer, but I had a second, a third, with my worst finish being 18th in 10 events. That was another thing that gave me the confidence that, you know what, I think I can turn pro now. If I would have went back east that summer and been finishing at the bottom and middle of the pack, I would have knew I wasn't ready. I definitely wanted to see how I stood against the best amateurs, and obviously didn't win, but I held my own in pretty much all the tournaments I played in. I turned pro right after I got back that summer. I got my tour card in '98.
So you had to go through Q school from '95 through '98 and earn each time back, which you did 4 successful times, correct?
I went '95 and '96 Q school, and I didn't get past the second stage both those years. So I was a caddy at Shadow Creek part-time. I was playing on the Golden State Tour. I was playing in any state opens I could get my hands onto. I didn't have sponsors, so I was just pretty much doing it on the West Coast. After 2 years of playing on the mini tours, I got a little frustrated that, I was just breaking even. The mini tours are very tough. There's not much money to be made. So Eric Dutt, my mentor, who's actually the GM at Reflection Bay, kind of introduced me to some people. We put together a sponsorship deal. And ironically, I had the sponsors and I got through Q school in '97. If I hadn't gotten through Q school, I was going to go to Japan or I was going to go to Asia. I was going somewhere where they had more money to play with, because I was just tired of, winning $1,200 for first place in a Golden State Tour event. It was just good timing. I mean, I think a lot of people that have successful runs in their journey have to have good timing in that. And as I put together my sponsorship deal, I happened to get my tour card that year. So it was very good timing.
Speaking of good timing, in 1999, the Las Vegas Invitational, you secured your card in Vegas. What was that feeling like, that you did it in your hometown and you had some confidence now going for the next year?
It was great. Obviously, the Vegas tournament probably meant the most to me of any of the tour events, just because I grew up watching it. I signed Barrett at it. As a hometown boy, you always want to play good in your hometown. Ironically, I never played great in the Vegas tournament. I think I always put too much pressure on myself. With that being said, I have shot a 61 and a 62 in the Vegas tournament. So I have played some fantastic rounds, but the Vegas tournament back then was 5 days. So one round was nice, but you needed to have 5 good days to have. So I think in '99, I think I finished top 20. I think I finished like 19th to secure my card. So that, I don't know that I finished better than that in my career in Vegas. So I enjoyed playing in it. I just know I put too much pressure on myself. That was the first year I kept my card, so it was a huge, huge achievement for me. And again, another confidence builder going forward.
And then the unfortunate happens in 2002. You have a hip and shoulder surgery. What caused the injury, and how late was the start for you to get into the season?
Good question. It was actually, my hip surgery was in September of '01. It happened to be the week after 9/11. That's why I can remember it. And then my shoulder surgery was 2 months later. It was a little bit of my golf swing. So I had a pretty homemade golf swing. I had a very open stance. because of my open stance, I was forced to rotate my hips more than normal. And I think the wear and tear of having to over rotate my hips because of my open stance caused a little bit of that. A little bit of it was conditioning. Back then, there was still, Tiger was getting on the scene and it hadn't really taken off yet with conditioning. So I will blame some of that on me, on needing to have a little better conditioning. Also, the doctor that did the surgery said he'd never seen anything like he saw in mine, that my labrum, so I had a torn labrum in my hip. My labrum had detached or had torn and attached to my bone. And he goes, the only way it could do that is if you hurt it as a kid, because kids heal up so fast. And I remember when I was 8 years old, I hurt my hip jumping on a trampoline and I fell off and I couldn't walk for a week. And I'm pretty positive that was probably what tore the labrum from my ligament and it was reattached to my bone. It was a combination of, I'm sure it was a combination of my setup and my swing, my conditioning, and that fall I had when I was a kid.
How long did it keep you out of competition?
September of 2001 is when I had my hip surgery, and March of 2002 was my next tournament, which was the Honda Classic in Florida. And I'll never forget, I got paired with Angel Cabrera, who was a European Tour player at the time, who's a bomber. And I had no idea who this guy was. And before my hip surgery, I was one of the longer, I always finished like in the 20s in driving distance, so I wasn't a short hitter. And I remember I got paired with him coming back from my hip surgery, and this guy was hitting it 50 yards past me. And I remember telling my caddy, man, maybe I'm coming back too soon. Well, I don't think I was coming back too soon. I was probably a little young in my recovery, but I was also playing with Angel Cabrera, who won a Masters and a U.S. Open and bombed it. But I remember it was a slap in the face going, oh my gosh, have I gotten that much shorter?
Did you have to apply for a medical extension or no?
I did. Let's see. 2002, trying to think. Remember where I finished on the money list in 2002.
What's the process like, Craig? How do you get into a medical extension?
Okay, so you have to have 3 years on tour, which I did. They take your average number of tournaments that you played, and they take the average number of tournaments that everyone plays, and you get to choose which one is higher. So I was playing more tournaments than the average tour player was. So I think I was playing in 30 events. In 2001, when I had the hip surgery, I think I played in, but I hadn't played a full season. When 2002 came, I had X amount of tournaments to make the difference in the money. Yeah, so I did lose my card in 2002, but I did have the medical extension for the next year. That's right. And in San Diego in 2003, I made enough money to qualify me, so I was fully exempt for the rest of the 2003 season. Played in 20 tournaments, and my average was 30. Well, I got 10 tournaments to make the difference up of however much money I was at to get to the top 125.
That makes sense. Is there more pressure on you then when you're playing on a medical exemption?
Well, no, I can't say there's more pressure. You're playing golf for a living. There's always pressure. If you don't perform, you get knocked down. It's just that simple. So you're always trying to, you're trying to play your best. You're trying to maximize what you do. Yeah, I can't really say there's more pressure.
Okay.
There's pressure though, but pressure goes along with the job. If you don't enjoy pressure, then it's the wrong sport for you.
And unfortunately, that wasn't the only injury you had in your career. Did you ever think back of what your career might have been if you just never got injured at all?
Well, that's fairy tale land. Everyone
Sure.
gets injured. I might have gotten maybe a little more injured than normal, but everyone gets injured. I had 2 hip surgeries, I had a shoulder surgery, and I had a wrist injury. And yes, they were all traumatic experiences in my journey, but I guarantee you every single tour pro can name off their traumatic situations as well. I don't have too many regrets, but if I could do it all over again, I would have obviously focused a little more on my fitness. My talent was enough. My golf game was enough. My work ethic was enough. And, obviously injuries were a part of my career. And if I could have minimized them, who knows what would happen. But live and learn, and that's what I learned in my journey. So I try to preach that to my students, that yes, you have to work hard at the game, but there's lots of pieces to the puzzle to play this game efficiently, and the body is definitely a big piece of that.
For our listeners out there, can you help maybe somebody, like you said, in golf, you're going to get injured. What's the keys to staying positive throughout your injury? Because on the other side, you're going to get to play again.
So good question. I remember coming back from my hip surgery in 2001 that I was, for like 6 weeks, I wasn't allowed to hit, but I was allowed to chip and putt. When I was allowed to chip and putt, I said, you know what? I'm going to make this a positive thing. I'm going to become a better chipper and putter than I've ever been. And I did. So my short game really got brought up to the next level during that injury. And probably from 2001 through 2006, my fitness kept getting better. Every year my fitness got better and I was pretty healthy. In 2007, I tore the cartilage in my wrist, and that was kind of the beginning of the end of my career. I played on it for 2 years after that, but it wasn't right.
Talk about overcoming adversity. 2004, you go to Q school. You really don't want to be there. You post a first round 80, the only player in history to come from that and earn your card. Talk to my listeners about A, your mindset when you got there, and B, your mindset once the 80 was posted.
Probably what I'm most famous for, and it's a negative and a positive at the same time. I was inside the top 125 the whole year. The last tournament of the year was in Tampa. I was 123 on the money list. Top 125 retains their exempt status for the next year. I missed the cut. I finished 126 on the money list. I'm the first guy out. So feeling sorry for myself, disappointed, mad, angry, sad, everything. Finishing 126 to 150 on the money list gets you exempt to the final stage of Q school. So I go to the final stage of Q school. I'm not wanting to be there. I had a bad attitude. My wife and I every year set aside money that if I had to go to Q school, that money was for Q school. And if I didn't have to go to Q school, we used that money to go on a vacation. So it was always a fun vacation whenever I could take my Q school money that I had set aside and we'd go have fun for a week. The whole week I'm going, man, I should be on my vacation. We should be having fun. Instead I'm having to grind out Q school. I just had the wrong attitude. So a buddy of mine's caddying for me and I shoot 80 the first round. I'm in last place. And when I got done with my round, he pulled me aside and he told me how disappointed he was in me on how bad my attitude was. I mean, here's my best friend who would never say anything to hurt my feelings, is confronting me, telling me how disappointed he was in me because of how I treated myself on the golf course. We went to dinner that night. And I wasn't arguing with him. I mean, he was obviously right. I vented to him. And he's like, listen, you're better than everyone here. You need to go out and just play golf. Quit thinking that it's Q school. Quit thinking you should be on vacation. He goes, go do what you do. He goes, I want you to put your tee in the ground on the first tee, and I want you to hit the ball down the middle of the fairway, and I want you to hit it on the green, and I want you to hit it to putt. We're just going to keep doing this over and over and over. Well, I shot 65 the next day. I shot 66 the next day. I think I shot 68 the next day, and I just started climbing my way back into this golf tournament. And literally all I changed was my attitude. I quit feeling sorry for myself. I was excited to play golf again. Instead of feeling, why am I here? I was going, okay, I'm a golfer. Let's go play golf. And it just shows you I kind of got out of my own way. And I birdied the 107th hole. There's 108 holes at Q school. I birdied up the 107th hole to get inside the number. So I wasn't inside the number until one hole to go. I birdied the 107th hole, and I parred the next hole to get my card. Really neat story in the sense that it just shows I was still the same golfer. It wasn't like I played any different. My demeanor changed, my attitude changed, my wanting to be there changed, and literally I went from last place in the tournament to get my tour card.
That had to feel good.
One of the highlights of my career, just to overcome adversity, I dug myself into a deep hole. If it would have been a 4-day Q school, I couldn't have dug myself out. But because it was 6 days, I had a little more time to keep clawing my way back in there. And it just proves that the game is physical, but it's also mental.
Speaking of mental, Craig, does the mindset change for somebody like you that you've played on the PGA Tour, you played on the Korn Ferry Tour, what it is today? Does the mindset change when you're playing on the Korn Ferry versus the PGA Tour?
I won't say that the mindset changes. The style of golf does change, though. So a lot of people ask that question, what's the difference between the PGA Tour and the Korn Ferry Tour? It isn't as much as you think golfers-wise. It's a huge difference with the style of golf that you have to play. So the PGA Tour prepares all year long for the 1 week. So the golf course is peaked out. It's in the best shape. The rough's the highest. The greens are the fastest. They've peaked their golf course out for the PGA Tour event that week. The Korn Ferry Tour literally just takes over the tour or takes over the golf course for a week. So because there's no money or there's less money on that tour, they can't prepare the same. They can't spend the finances to peak the golf course like the PGA Tour does. So course management means less on the Korn Ferry Tour. So you have not to take away anything from the play because the players are really good out there, but there's less thinking involved on that tour. The rough isn't an issue. Generally, the greens aren't that much faster and firmer than a normal week. So it's literally it's who drives the ball far and straight and who makes putts. Where on the PGA Tour, a little less important of that because now your brain comes into play. Now it's more strategy. It's, hey, how many fairways can I hit? How many greens can I hit? And I do have to say that the game has changed since I've left it in the sense that now guys on the PGA Tour are hitting it even that much farther. So they're not necessarily afraid to play out of the rough because they're hitting more shorter irons into the green. The style of play today compared to my last year on tour, which was 2008, has changed. So I'd be lying if I said the game hasn't changed or hasn't went to a more power game because it has. But when I was playing, course management meant a lot more than it does today. Now, there still are a handful of tournaments on the PGA Tour that you notice the scores aren't real low. Those are the weeks that course management becomes a big deal again. The Players' Championship, the majors, the Wachovia Championship, the bigger, better tournaments. Riviera, they never shoot that low at Riviera.
No.
So, it's fun watching the game evolve, but I'm curious to see when they're going to and how they're going to slow it down because the athlete just keeps getting bigger and stronger, hits it farther, and the golf courses are running out of room. So that's the thing I'm kind of the most interested in going forward is what are they going to do to slow this down a little bit?
I want to take you back and see if I can get your brain to a certain part, but you've made 170 cuts on tour. It's a 54% rate, which is outstanding. Do you remember what your first cut was like? Did you have any nerves or did you make that cut pretty easy?
No, I had nerves in every cut I made. So there is nothing easy out there. What I will say is as a golfer, you kind of welcome nerves. Now, there is a such thing as too much nerves, and that's when you start getting shaky. But golfers play their best when they're nervous. So the thing I remember the most when I would come home, when I would be on the road for 4 or 5 weeks, and I would come home and I'd take a few days off, and I'd go play with my buddies, I hated it because I didn't have any nerves. Like there was nothing, my stomach wasn't turning. There was nothing there was no adrenaline. So definitely playing in front of crowds and TV and the golf courses being immaculately perfect and tough, you have lots of adrenaline when you're playing. Word nerves is a good thing. Have I ever felt nerves where my hands are shaking? Yes, and that's not a good thing. So luckily that doesn't happen much. I have had it a few times. As you get older and a little more wiser, you kind of know what to do when you start feeling that way. But the first few times it happens, you don't know what to do. Again, I preach this a lot with my students as well. I'm like, what do you do when you get nervous? And I'm always curious to hear how they answer. The answer I dislike the most is, I don't get nervous. And I don't like when my students tell me that answer because I know they're lying or they're not human being, one of the two.
Agree.
But to answer your question on, I remember my first cut. It was the Sony Open in Hawaii. It was my third event on tour, and I was really nervous. However, it's just golf. Like, you just got to say, okay, I recognize that I'm nervous. There's still a golf ball. There's still a target. There's still a pre-shot routine, and there's still commitment to the shot that I'm trying to hit. So as long as you always come back to the process, you can handle nerves. If you are always thinking about your nerves and not the process, the nerves will win every time.
You're a PGA Tour veteran, happened in 2011. How does somebody on tour achieve that status?
Good question. You either have to make 150 cuts, which is how I qualified for this, or you have to win on tour. So what I did making 150 cuts is called a veteran member. And somebody that's won on tour that hasn't made 150 cuts is in the same category as me. They're called a past champion, though. But the past champion and the veteran member are linked into the same category. It was a very big deal for me because being a veteran member on the PGA Tour, I'm a member of the PGA Tour for the rest of my life. I have the benefits of all the TPC golf courses, health insurance, retirement, all the perks of anybody that's qualified for that. It doesn't mean that I can play full time, but there is a category for me, but it is the last category. Probably up until 2 years ago, I was still playing in a handful of tour events a year because my number was high enough. Well, I think in 2018, I got in 3 events on tour and I didn't make any of those cuts. So I shuffled down and I haven't gotten in a tournament since, which I'm actually okay with now. I'm 47 years old. That's called no man's land for the PGA Tour.
Unfortunately.
I'm waiting for the Champions Tour. And it doesn't mean that I am going to make it and I have to qualify for it, but I'm definitely going to give it a run, and if I don't make it, then I'll just continue to teach. If I make it, we'll give my career a chapter 2.
That's right. And we'll be doing another podcast later on about second career.
Yeah, there you go.
Craig, you said 150 cuts to make the PGA Tour veteran. I'm sure you remember that cut, or did you know you were close, or did you not know? Or I'm sure you knew. All golfers pretty much know all numbers, but what do you remember about that 150th cut?
Yeah, great question, and this is another fun story. In 2008, I had lost my exempt status on the PGA Tour, and I had 148 cuts. I was sick to my stomach. I knew I was that close to achieving my veteran member status, but I no longer had any status on the PGA Tour. So I was like, how in the world am I going to get 2 more cuts as not a member of the PGA Tour anymore? I met a lot of connections in my journey. I used some of those connections. Mike Weir's a good friend of mine. He got me a sponsor exemption into the Canadian Open. I missed the cut by 1. A friend of mine got me a spot into the Pebble Beach AT&T. I missed the cut by 1 because all I could think about was making a cut. So if you focus on the cut, you're going to be right around the cut, where you should be focusing on trying to win the golf tournament, not making a cut. I actually Monday qualified for the Buick Open in Flint, Michigan, and I made the cut. So now I'm at 149 cuts, and that was in 08. So my last tour event in '08 was the U.S. Open at Torrey Pines. 2 months later, I Monday qualified for the Buick Open in Flint. That gave me 149 cuts. Well, I had tried some Monday qualifiers for the next 6 months. I didn't make any of them. So now I'm at 149 cuts, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be known as the guy with 149 cuts. And it was like, I couldn't sleep at night. It was bothering me that much. Ironically, exactly 1 year later, after I Monday qualified for the Buick Open in Michigan, I fly back to Michigan to try to Monday qualify for this event. I'm on the golf course. I'm on the fourth hole of the qualifier, and a rules official drives up to me and he goes, Craig, I have to disqualify you from this qualifier. And I was like, I gave him the dirtiest look. I'm like, what the hell did I do wrong? And he goes, the tournament director gave you a spot in the tournament.
Oh, nice.
So I was like, oh, it was like the greatest. It was like the greatest. I was writing letters to all these tournaments going, please give me an opportunity to make my 150th cut. Well, this guy, he accepted it. He wanted to give me that opportunity, and I happened to make the cut. Ironically, I had to par the ninth hole, which was my nemesis hole. I mean, I played in this tournament for 10 years, and I never liked this ninth hole. It was super tight. I just always kept hitting in the trees. I made bogey on that hole. I can't tell you how many times. So I'm on that tee. It's my 36th hole of the tournament, and I know if I make par, I'm going to make the cut. And I prayed and I go, please let me hit this ball down the fairway. And I hit it right down the middle of the fairway, and I hit an 8-iron right in the middle of the green. And I had like a 25-footer, and I left it like an inch short of the hole. And I had just that extreme peace that I had finally done this. And I tapped the putt in. Sure enough, I made the cut, and the rest is history.
That had to be a huge weight off your shoulders when that was accomplished.
Huge. Now the question is, okay, well, that was your 150th cut. Well, how did you now have 170 cuts? Well, that got me into that veteran member category. In the year before, I had made, I don't remember, a couple thousand on tour, which wasn't enough to keep your tour card, but it was enough to get me on top of my category. So like in 2009, it got me in 10 tournaments, and then out of those 10 tournaments, I think I made 7 of the cuts. So then the next year I got in 8 tournaments, and I would make 5 of those cuts. And the next year I'd play in 6 tournaments, and I'd make 4 of the cuts. And then, so you can see how it's kind of dwindling down, but I was still getting opportunities to play in tournaments. And I think in 2010, I finished 5th. I finished 5th at the Reno Tahoe Open. So that was a big check, and it got me into more tournaments the next year. And so there was a 5 or 6 year span where even though I wasn't fully exempt on the tour, I was still getting in a handful of tournaments every year, which was nice because it was keeping me competitive, and it was keeping my dream alive that maybe I would win one week. And I had my chances. I just never got to do it.
Well, you played in 8 majors, which is fantastic. The PGA at Medina, played the Open at Royal Birkdale, and 6 U.S. Opens. We talked about Oakmont, 2 at Pinehurst, Wingfoot, Torrey Pines, Pebble Beach. Of all those majors, which one sticks out in your brain the most?
Well, the U.S. Opens mean the most to me. The British Open I played in at Royal Birkdale was the neatest. The fans are a lot different, a lot more golf respect. So at a U.S. Open, if you tap in a 2-footer for par, they don't clap. They clap for 2-footers for par at the British Open. When you hit a drive down the middle of the fairway and it looked correct, they clap. Because of the history of the game over there, the etiquette and the respect for the golf is just a little different. And I wouldn't say that the Americans don't respect golf, but it's a little more of a party atmosphere than it was over there. I remember I finished my first round of the British Open at like 9:40 at night. It didn't get dark until after 11 o'clock.
Wow.
So here I am finishing at 9:40 at night the first day. Think about it. 9:40 at night, there was probably only 500 people in the grandstand, but they gave me and the two players a standing ovation as we walked up.
Wow,
And
that's neat.
They don't know who Craig Barlow is, and they don't know who the other. We were just qualifiers for the tournament, but that blew me away. Like, the respect that they gave you just for being in the tournament gives me the goosebumps just thinking about it. The U.S. Opens are more rowdy, more fun, more electric. The weather's better. The British Open I played in at Royal Birkdale was just the worst weather, which is what everyone always says. But to tell you how bad the weather was in the year I played, Padraig Harrington won at 3 over par. He won by 4. Solo fourth was 11 over par.
Wow, that's some tough conditions.
It was even bad weather for a British Open. I think I shot 78, 76, and I missed the cut by 2. It was a great experience. They're all great experiences. Best way to describe playing in a major championship is I played golf for a living, and those weeks I did it for free. Like, the kid comes out of you when you play in something like that. You know, there's just so much history in those tournaments. It's golf's grand stage. Golf could feel like a job a lot of the times, and it never felt like a job when you're at a major.
What is the importance of ball striking, not just for somebody like you that played on tour, but for the listener that's the amateur out playing?
It's important, but it's less important than people think. It's important. I mean, the whole game is important. If you want to play the kind of golf that everyone's capable of playing, yes, you need to be efficient at it. However, ball striking isn't as fancy as people think it needs to be. You have to obviously keep your golf ball on the golf course. So if you're driving the ball out of play, you'll have no fun playing this game. In order of importance, there's 4 areas of the game, and I'll give you my order of importance. Putting is number 1. Driving is number 2. Short game is 3. And approach shots are 4. I always said to play high-level golf, you have to drive the ball well, and you have to putt well. For the amateur golfer, I would love to see the amateur golfer focusing less on their swing and more from 100 yards and in. With that being said, I don't want them to neglect their swing, because you have to drive the ball in play. If a 15 handicapper wants to become an 8 handicapper, he isn't going to hit it that much better to become an 8 handicapper. His 100 yards and in has got to get better. So
Makes perfect sense.
You can hit it a lot better as a 15 handicapper and become a 12. If you get great at 100 yards and in as a 15 handicapper, you'll become a 6 or an 8. Now, if you want to go from a 6 to a scratch, yes, the ball striking's got to clean up. You maybe a little more distance off the tee. Yeah, that matters, but it's not, people love going to the driving range and beating balls. I want to see you spend 70% of your practice 100 yards and in, 30% of your practice drivers and irons. That
is Craig Barlow. He is the director of instruction, High Performance Golf Institute. People go to highperformancegolf.com. You can get in touch with Craig and sign up, or to get a lesson and talk to him more about improving your game. Craig, thanks so much for being part of the show today.
Tommy, it was great. I appreciate you having me.
Everybody, hope you enjoyed the show. This is Before the Lights podcast. For show notes, go to the website, and you can get more information there. And follow us on Instagram at beforethelightspod.com. Thanks for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. We will talk to you next time.